If you're here, you likely don't have much bandwidth to learn a ton of new content to ace the SAT, am I right? So this video is going to help you drastically raise your digital SAT score with just tips and tricks that change how you go about the test, not actual studying. Are you ready? So I'm going to switch things up. I'm going to do first a general tip, then I'm going to do math tips and tricks, and then I'm going to do reading, writing tips and tricks. Let's do the first one. Okay, let's talk guessing strategy first. And this is regardless of which section of the digital SAT that you are doing. So sometimes you run out of time. Sometimes you just don't know how to do a problem. You literally have no idea what the text is saying. You literally have no idea about that math topic because you've never seen it before. So if it's a multiple choice question, so all the reading, writing are going to be multiple choice, and about 3/4 of the math questions are going to be multiple choices. You're going to have a letter of the day. I don't know. Do you like A, B, C, or D better, right? You're going to do whichever one is going to be your letter of the day. And that is the one that if you don't have time, or if you just truly have no idea and you have to guess, you're going to pick that same letter on test day. Okay. Now you're probably asking, well, what about those like 11 student produced response math questions, ones where I actually have to like type in my answer? Okay. If you try to do the problem and you think you know how to do it, obviously give it your best shot. But if it's one of those, I don't have time, or I absolutely have no idea how to do this, the best guess for you is going to be a single digit integer. That means between 0 and 9. So a single digit integer between 0 and 9. So I wouldn't go with a negative single digit integer. Those just don't show up as often as the answers, but so many times the answer is 8, 2, 0, 9. So if you have no idea what it is and you don't have time, then just pick something between 0 and 9, an integer. Your chances are low, but they're way better than trying to pick 1.048 or something like that. So that is the first tip, is how you guess on the entire test. So hi, if you don't know me yet, my name is Kristina of Ivy Lounge Test Prep. And for the past 15 years, I've been helping high schoolers all over the globe drastically raise their SAT and ACT test scores and ultimately get into the colleges of their dreams. So now I have a question for you, and that is, what tips and tricks have you heard already about the digital SAT? Any that have actually helped or raised your score? If so, I want to know what they are. I'm always learning and improving. So if there's something that works for you, write it down in the comments below. I can't wait to hear what they are. And while you're at it, just go ahead and thumbs up, like this video, and also subscribe to my channel. And then that way you'll be the first to know when I upload my new videos. Okay, let's talk digital SAT math tips and tricks now. So I think the biggest thing that doesn't really require studying, I mean, like right now, the 30 seconds you're going to learn it is your studying, is to understand a few very basic English word to actual math equation translations. Okay, because once you learn a few of them, and I'm sure you instinctively know them, but once you learn a few that are like, oh, that always means that, you will never get confused again in word problems. And often the sentence will literally solve the problem for you. So let me show you what I mean. Okay, so what you're looking at is a page in my digital SAT math cram plan, which is part of my online course, the Ultimate Digital SAT Math Guide, that you can self-pace, watch, or just binge to learn the strategies and concepts for the math section of the digital SAT. So a lot of these you might know, but let's talk the biggies that most students don't know. This little word here, of, literally always means multiply. Like always, in every situation, it always means multiply. This little word per always means divide, literally, every time you read it in a word problem. If you have like what or how much or some number, a quantity, an amount, some unknown thing like that, that's going to be your variable, X, N, Y, K, whatever you want your variable to be. So let's put a few of these together. If I were to have the word percent, well, that's really the word per, and that's also the word cent, which if you've taken Spanish or Italian, I took Italian, or French, cent, cento, it means 100 in Latin, okay? So percent is literally going to be divided by 100. So when I get to something like what percent, literally what means X, percent means divided by 100. It's X over 100. And then here's the other thing you need to know. is, are, was, were, basically the to be verb in any tense, past, future, present, or the have verb. Those are basically the equals sign, okay? Yes, there are other things you can learn, but let's just talk about that. So this brings me to my second math tip and trick is now that you know certain English to math translations, oh my gosh, solving percents is a dream. Like literally, here, I'm going to make it bigger for you. Like right here, if we have a math sentence, what is 35% of M? I literally go by and translate it word for word in order from left to right. What, the X, is equals 35%, 35 divided by 100 of times M. And I can literally solve, right? 60 is 35% of what? 60 equals 35 over 100 times X. Literally, you can go word for word. You no longer have to think of what these percents mean. You literally can just translate them and solve for the variable and you're done. So like that is my second hack, which has to do with translating English into math, but that's easy percents. The next tip and trick is if you are dealing with a coordinate geometry question. So like what something looks like on the XY Cartesian plane or the rectangular plane. And you're trying to solve these equations. Maybe it's two lines together, maybe it's a line with a parabola, or even three things. Use the built-in Desmos calculator. Like the moment, like it's like y equals, the moment you type in the rest, it immediately graphs it for you. It's like a no-brainer. So that does a lot of the work for you. So when you're trying to find how many solutions or find exactly what the solution is, like the XY coordinate point of the solution, just use Desmos. If you are doing a system of linear equations and they're written out in standard form, like they're not written y equals, but it's like 2x plus 3y equals 7, and they're both like that, then you might not, maybe you don't want to do Desmos, but maybe you want to do the elimination technique, where you see if you can subtract one equation from the other and if a variable cancels out. Okay, here's another tip and trick for the SAT math section. So let's say that you get to a problem and you're just flummoxed. You're just really unsure of how to solve this question. Well, the beautiful thing is with the Blue Book app, you get to flag it and move on and not waste your time, right? So that's the first thing, like don't spend more than a few seconds if you're truly like bewildered about how to solve it. But hopefully you, after you go through the module and you're like, okay, I did all the ones that I like totally know how to do the moment I saw them, go back and do those flagged questions, right? And let's say you're looking at a flagged question and you were bewildered a few minutes ago, but now you're going to give it a second try. And you still don't know how to do it. It wasn't just like a brain fart in the moment. And now that you're warmed up, you get it. That often does happen. But you truly still don't know how to do it. So what you're going to do is one of my favorite strategies for problem solving that I also talk about in my online math course. And it's called following the answers. So what do I mean by following the answers? Well, quite simply, if you have a multiple choice question and you see what the answer choices look like the format of them, think to yourself, what's one thing, doesn't have to be a million things, what's one thing I can do to the equation or the numbers I was given to make it look one step closer to my answers? So what do I mean by that? Like, are your answer choices all fractions? Are they decimals? Well, maybe you should be thinking of looking at your numbers or your expression in a fraction or as a decimal. Does it have a k squared in the denominator? Okay, maybe you can divide both sides of your equation by k squared. Or maybe you need to square both sides of things so that the regular k becomes k squared. You get the idea. And then from there, it might ping another thought and you get another clue about what the next step is. Basically, what you're doing is looking for clues in the answer choices and literally thinking, how can I make what I have look one more step like that? And that is following the answers. Now, another tip and trick for the SAT's math section is, let's say you have a problem having to do with averages or means, or you have something about distance, like I'm going 10 miles an hour on a bike. How long does it take to get there if I go this distance, right? Distance. Or you have a work problem. What you are going to do is with your scratch paper that hopefully you brought with you to the test, you are going to quickly jot down the basic formula. I will show you what that looks like. So for averages, you're literally jotting down average equals total divided by number of things. Or my favorite, which is if you cross multiplied this, and I often find it's way more effective and useful, is average times the number of things equals the total. You're literally just jotting it down before you even start to think about what you're doing in the problem. If it's a distance problem, you're literally going to write down distance equals rate times time, or D equals R times T. If it's a work problem, you're literally going to write down with your actual hand and your pen or pencil, work equals rate times time, or W equals R times T. Now, the reason that I want you to actually jot these down is because with average, with distance, with work problems, I've seen this with, oh my gosh, all my students practically, they tend to overcomplicate the problem. But in actuality, there are only 3 variables. You probably were given 2 of them. Therefore, you need to find out what the third one is, because that's either the answer or you need it to then find out the answer to whatever it is they've asked you in the question. So that is the basics of algebra word problems like that, is jot it down so you do not overcomplicate. And one of my favorite tips and tricks for math that I just love and is so easy to do is if you see any sort of equation and it has a fraction in it, oh, please, please, for the love of all that is wonderful in this world, cross multiply before you do anything else. Doesn't matter if it's a single fraction equal to a number, or if it's a fraction equal to another fraction, just cross multiply, make your life simpler. Just do that first and then see what the next step is. And one more little tip and trick is if you see a bunch of fractions in an equation, or you have a bunch of decimals in an equation, think about multiplying out the fraction or multiplying out the decimal. What that might look like is if you have a bunch of fractions, well, what's like the least common denominator of all of them? Over here, we've got like 3/2 and then 4/6, and then, you add them and you equal some other thing over 18. Well, what might be the least common denominator of the 4, the 6, and the 18? If you multiply everything by that, you're not going to have fractions anymore. And now you're just going to have most likely integers. And for whatever reason, that's just easier for most students I have come across to work with. So same with decimals. If everything is like 0.23x plus 0.48 equals 1.97 or something like that, you see that if you were to multiply each of those by 100, like move the decimal 2 places, you would no longer have decimals. So just do it. So do that, and now you're dealing with integers, not decimals. And even though they're basically the same numbers, for whatever reason, it just makes most students work faster and not have so many setbacks or doubts about what the next step is. So those are my favorite math tips and tricks for the digital SAT that requires basically no studying. Okay, so now let's go to the digital SAT's reading and writing section. So my first tip for this section is that most, not all, but for most of the questions in the modules, please read the question stem first before you start reading the text. Now I go more into why and exactly like which questions and what order they're in. I call it my secret sequence, and then my general reading and writing question strategy in my online course, the Ultimate Reading and Writing Guide for the Digital SAT. But I can tell you this right now, is for most of the questions, if you read the question stem first, that's the part that's on the right side in Blue Book, right above the 4 multiple choice answers, then you will save so much reading and rereading of the text. So do that for most of the questions. You will thank me. So my second quick tip and trick for the digital SAT's reading and writing section has to do with those sentence completion questions. So those are the questions that occur at the very beginning of each module. And they have a sentence or two, and then there's an underline with no word there. And you think they're vocab questions. They sort of are. Not really, because most of these are words that you do know. It's just maybe they're different meanings, different definitions of those words. So my tip here is that when you are reading this and you encounter the word that has the underscore and there is no word there, it's a blank, just go ahead and say blank, keep reading. Do not look at the answer choices. Instead, after you finish reading the little text, the 2 or 3 sentences, you are going to jot down again on your scratch piece of paper that I hope you brought with you. You're going to write down the meaning of what you would put there, like what word you would write in there. It doesn't have to be a fancy word. It doesn't have to be like, oh, high vocab word. It just needs to kind of make very objective and concrete what you think the meaning is of that blank. Once you've written that down, then, my friend, you can go ahead and look at your answer choices and see, okay, do any of these words match that? And then if they do, then you have your answer right there. If not, there are other strategies you can use. I obviously go into more detail in my course, but this basic tip and trick will probably help you with, I'd say, like 8 out of 10 of them. So do that. Write in your own word first on your scratch paper. Don't look at the answers. After you're done reading and you know what the meaning needs to be, then go look at the answers. You will thank me. My next tip and trick of the digital SATs reading writing section has to do with those questions that I lovingly call claims questions. And they're around the middle of the modules, and you'll have a text and they will ask you things like, please strengthen the argument or weaken the argument, or what example would illustrate the claim or illustrate the conclusion, something like that. Often there are bar graphs or charts or some form of table along with the text that you might have to pull from. So those are the claims questions, okay? So here is my tip there. You are going to read the question stem first. Figure out, okay, it's asking to strengthen, it's asking to weaken, oh, it's asking to illustrate an example. It's usually one of those 3 things. So the first step is question stem. The next step is read the text, but your eye is going to be looking out for what is the claim, as in what is like the conclusion or the thing that the author or the person that the author wrote about is like trying to prove in that little text. That is your claim. Now, once you have that claim, now you can go back to what the question is asking and be like, okay, great. What evidence would like support that person? Oh, what would, poke a hole in that theory? That would be weakening or undermining. Oh, okay. What would be a specific example that would like illustrate that in action? So now it's much easier. But this way, you only have to read the text once and you can stay very focused. So that is my claims trick for you that you can learn right now. So my 4th tip and trick for you, and this one does require like some studying of content, but believe me, it's worth it because this is like very learnable. It's very like black and white and objective. And once you know it, you will always get these questions right. And that is know your punctuation rules. Okay. So honestly, it's the single most tested topic of grammar that you will find on the digital SAT. Okay. And I have my punctuation cheat sheet. It's like 4 pages long. It is in my reading writing guide for the digital SAT and like the grammar rules ebook. And, obviously you can do that if you want, but I want to share a few biggies with you right now that most students get confused. So I'm going to share my screen and show you. Okay. So these are the biggies that people make mistakes on. So a lot of times a student will think that you can just put a complete clause or a complete sentence or independent clause, however you want to call it, with another complete, and that you only need a comma to, separate them. And this is going to give you a big old X and it will take away points and you will always be getting the wrong answer. This is called a comma splice. It has a special place in what I call grammar jail, and you don't want to be there. And it's so easy to fix. So why not learn how to fix it? Okay. So here's one way to fix it is we could have a complete with another complete. And sure, we can keep the comma, but we add what is called a coordinating conjunction, AKA fanboys. I know you've probably heard of this. It's for and nor, but, or, yet, so. Literally those 7 words and those 7 words only. So if you add one of these coordinating conjunctions, one of these fanboys before the second complete, what you have basically done is you have demoted the complete clause into a dependent, right? Like the Labrador puppy plays. Sentence, but the Labrador puppy plays. No longer a sentence. See what I just did there? I added but, I added a fanboy, and it's no longer complete. So then that's why this works, is because if you only have a comma is great. A comma puts a complete with a dependent together, no problem. So that's what the fanboys does. It, in essence, turns the complete into a dependent so that this comma is now a-okay. And then you get the question right, okay? So another big mistake that people do is they go fanboy happy, okay? So they have a complete sentence, they have another complete clause over here, and they use a semicolon, which would be great, but then they decide to add one of those coordinating conjunction fanboys in, right? And what happens when you do this is, remember, I just said that one of these fanboys will turn this complete into a dependent. And now the semicolon no longer works because we only use a semicolon if you have a complete sentence with another complete sentence. So semicolon fanboys, wrong. But if you just have a semicolon and you have two completes, now you're getting the question right. Another thing that you could do is you could have the complete with another complete, and you got your semicolon. And sure, you can have a transition with a comma. So you could be like complete sentence, semicolon. However, comma, second complete sentence. That's totally fine because the type of transition word that you would have that you separate with a comma, that would be the type of transition word that does not affect this complete clause. And so it stays a complete clause. So then you're happy using your semicolon and you're getting the question correct. Again, I go through all the punctuation rules in my grammar rules for the digital SAT ebook that's in my reading writing course, but that is one little snippet so that you can see it and hopefully get like 3 or 4 more questions right. So the last question type I want to talk about for the reading writing section of the digital SAT is what I call the research notes questions. So these are going to be the very last questions you encounter in each of the reading writing modules. And you will know what they look like because not only are they last, but they're the ones with bullet points. Okay. And it always starts like, oh, students made the following research, notes about XYZ topic. And then it has bullet points of different facts that the student has found out. And then you have the question. So here's how you do those really quickly to save time and get it right and stay focused. The first thing you are going to do is you are going to read the question stem first, right? Because every single question asks something very different. One might be asking the 2 ways that the blue jay feeds. And then another question might be talking about which one introduces the artist with a strong emphasis on her background history. Okay, so they're very specific asks. So you're going to read the question stem first. Now you're going to go and read the notes, right? And then you are going to look at your answers. And the answer choice that is correct is going to have 3 things to it. One of them is it's going to be grammatically correct. The second thing is it's going to be true according to the bullet points in the research notes, okay? You might not think it's true, but according to the bullet points, it is true. And the third thing is that it is going to directly answer the very specific task you were asked about, whatever that question was. Think of it as a game of Simon Says. Doesn't matter what you would have written. It's, well, they asked me to talk about the background of the artist in the introductory sentence. So even though I wouldn't have done that, I need to do that to fulfill what the question is asking. So if you can do those 3 things, it's grammatically correct, it is true according to the research notes, and it answers exactly the specific task that was asked, you will get those right. So I actually go way further into detail about how to dramatically raise your digital SAT reading writing score in a free webinar I have that's called The 3 Biggest Mistakes to Avoid in the Digital SAT's Reading Writing section, and obviously how to fix them. So check it out in the link below. Again, it is free and it will help you raise your score.